Billionaire thought. His pregnant wife couldn't live without him until she left with their daughter. Emma Caldwell's luxurious world revolved around the opulent parties and glittering skyscrapers of Manhattan. At least, that's what her billionaire husband, Gabriel Caldwell, believed. He had always assumed that Emma needed him like a plant needs water, that without his fortune and influence, she'd wither away. But Gabriel never bothered to look deeper, to see her quiet strength, her hidden dreams, or her unspoken fears. One fateful evening, Emma packed a few bags and gently woke their 6-year-old daughter, Sophie. Together, they vanished into the night. When Gabriel realized Emma was truly gone, his carefully curated empire began to crumble from within. Gabriel Caldwell, a billionaire CEO, commanded respect in New York's elite circles. He built Caldwell Ventures into a powerhouse, but at home his arrogance blinded him to his failing marriage. Gabriel Caldwell was a billionaire who thrived in boardrooms but neglected his own home. He attributed this disquiet to the daily stress of running a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. But truthfully, it had more to do with his marriage. His wife, Emma Caldwell, née Peterson, embodied a quiet elegance. Raised in the suburbs of upstate New York, she was the antithesis of the cutthroat socialites who normally surrounded Gabriel. While people assumed she'd married him for money or status, their union stemmed from genuine love, at least in the beginning. They had met at a charity gala hosted by the Harrington Foundation, where Emma volunteered part-time. Her sincerity and warmth captivated Gabriel, standing out against a backdrop of feigned smiles and diamond necklaces. Their wedding was a grand affair, but beneath the glamour, Emma hoped for something real. Yet behind the polished veneer, cracks began to show. Gabriel's towering ego, once merely a byproduct of his success, hardened into a sense of entitlement. He believed that Emma, raised far from his circles, should be eternally grateful for her charmed life. Meanwhile, Emma grappled with isolation. She found her suggestions about philanthropic work brushed aside by Gabriel as unimportant. She felt more like a decorative piece than a partner. Sophie grew into a sweet, inquisitive child, and Emma devoted herself to motherhood. This only solidified Gabriel's assumption that Emma existed solely to ensure domestic harmony. When Emma's eyes shone with longing for some purpose beyond the gates of wealth, Gabriel didn't notice, or worse, he dismissed her needs. After all, to him, Emma's world revolved around the Caldwell name. Their closest friends and family caught glimpses of Emma's restless spirit. Her longtime confidant, Maria Farnsworth, commented once, "I never see you out doing the things you used to love, Em, like volunteering or teaching art classes. You okay?" Emma forced a smile, deflecting the concern. Inside, however, seeds of discontent took root. Gabriel, preoccupied with building new ventures and flaunting success, rarely paused to question his wife's quiet changes. He reasoned she had everything: wealth, a team of staff at her beck and call, and a supportive husband who made sure every bill was paid twice over. He was convinced Emma could not survive without him, and that notion was about to be shattered in a way he never anticipated. Before Emma married Gabriel, she had nurtured a dream of teaching underprivileged children. She'd studied child psychology in college, spent hours tutoring at a local community center, and once believed she'd run her own youth mentoring program. But these aspirations fell by the wayside once she entered Gabriel's world. Expectations of a Caldwell wife were crystal clear: attend high-profile gatherings, manage a curated social calendar, and never ruffle feathers in philanthropic boards. Sometimes she'd share her dreams with Richard Harrington, the family's longtime butler and confidant. He'd known Gabriel since childhood and was one of the few staff members Emma trusted implicitly. "That spark in your eyes says you're still longing, Mrs. Caldwell," Richard observed one afternoon while serving tea in the sunroom. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Emma smiled faintly, appreciating his kindness. I used to feel so alive when I volunteered. Now, it's like I'm in a bubble. Everything's orchestrated around Gabriel's schedule." But each time she tried to peel back his current persona, she hit a wall. He was too busy for introspection, consumed by the next deal, and content to assume Emma found her role fulfilling. Over time, Emma's attempts at deeper conversations about personal growth, about expanding her involvement in charities, became less frequent, overshadowed by his casual arrogance. Sophie often asked, "Mommy, do you like Daddy's parties?" Emma didn't have the heart to lie outright, but neither did she want to talk ill of Gabriel. "They're fine, dear," she'd reply, plastering on that familiar smile. One day, Emma received a call from an old professor, Dr. Patricia Reynolds, who had heard about Emma's philanthropic interests. There was a volunteer opening at a community center in Queens, assisting low-income children with after-school activities. The role would be flexible, perfect for a mother with a busy schedule. Emma's heart soared at the prospect. Finally, a chance to reclaim her identity. But when she mentioned it to Gabriel at dinner that night, just as the staff served lamb medallions with rosemary sauce, he brushed her off. "Why waste your time on that? We could arrange a bigger donation, hire staff to do that job, and you'll be more useful focusing on Caldwell Foundation events." Those words, "why waste your time," clung to Emma's thoughts long after dinner ended. She felt her throat tighten with the sting of tears she refused to shed. Gabriel concluded that conversation with a casual wave of his hand, as though the matter was settled. At that moment, Emma realized that if she didn't act soon, her voice would disappear altogether. Over the subsequent weeks, the rift between Emma and Gabriel grew more evident. The atmosphere in the penthouse became suffocating, laced with unspoken resentment and mounting tension. Rather than addressing the problem head-on, Gabriel doubled down on his assumption that Emma was merely going through a phase. In his eyes, once she snapped out of it, life would resume its normal course. Dinner parties, philanthropic galas, and scheduled vacations to exotic locales. Their marital bed became as cold as the marble floors. Gabriel, absorbed in business deals, left home at dawn and returned well past midnight. Emma, for her part, busied herself with Sophie's routines, ballet recitals, reading bedtime stories, and quiet, introspective evenings where she considered her next move. One night, Gabriel invited Emma to a high-stakes investor dinner at the famed Le Châtel restaurant. She reluctantly agreed, hoping to at least spend some time with him, even if it was under the watchful gaze of corporate elites. Arriving in a sleek black limousine, Emma wore a champagne-colored gown, exuding elegance that belied her internal turmoil. The dinner itself was an ostentatious display of wealth, platter after platter of caviar, gold-leaf desserts, and vintage wines that cost more than most people's yearly rent. As Emma sat next to Gabriel, listening to discussions of leveraged buyouts and overseas expansions, she felt a familiar sense of alienation. Whenever she tried to interject with a thought, perhaps a more humanitarian viewpoint, she was politely ignored or cut off by Gabriel's entourage. Her seat neighbor, a hedge fund manager named Jonathan Pierce, indulged her polite small talk about Sophie, but his eyes kept drifting toward more important conversations about quarterly returns. Emma realized that in these circles she was either Gabriel's wife or invisible. A pang of longing for something real, something honest, seized her chest. Later that evening, when they returned home, Emma confronted Gabriel. She stood in the living room, arms folded protectively. "I'm unhappy," she stated plainly. "I want to do something meaningful with my time, help others, especially children who aren't born into wealth. Why can't you support me in that?" Gabriel, exasperated and slightly tipsy from the expensive wines, scowled. You have everything, a beautiful home, staff, financial security. Why chase after something so trivial?" He tossed his jacket onto a nearby chair. "I'm busy building an empire for this family, for Sophie's future. You're supposed to manage the social aspects, not question our lifestyle." His words echoed in the high-ceilinged room. Emma felt as if she was drowning in an ocean of gilded furniture and custom-made drapes. She locked eyes with Gabriel, her voice trembling. "Do you think I'm ungrateful? That I should just smile and nod, living in your shadow?" He brushed off the anger in her tone. Yes, I do, because let's face it, you wouldn't last a day out there without my resources. I'm the one who got us here. I'm the one who can keep us here. Stop acting like you're the victim." That final remark sliced through Emma's heart. Without a second thought, she turned on her heel and went straight to Sophie's room. The little girl was asleep, her breathing soft and peaceful. Emma stood by Sophie's bedside, tears stinging her eyes as she considered the life lesson she was inadvertently teaching her daughter, that a woman should remain voiceless if financially secure. In that moment, Emma resolved that she would no longer allow Sophie to grow up believing this was normal. If Gabriel refused to respect her autonomy, she would take matters into her own hands, no matter the cost. Emma spent the following days in a sort of daze, meticulously planning her exit. Despite the overwhelming wealth that surrounded her, she had a personal savings account, small by Caldwell standards, but enough to get by for a few months. Gabriel had given her access to a substantial monthly stipend for household expenses. Unbeknownst to him, she'd been quietly setting aside portions of it for emergencies. Now that foresight might just save her. She confided her plans in only one person, Maria Farnsworth, her closest friend from college, who had remained steadfast even when Emma's world shifted into the billionaire sphere. They met at a modest cafe in Soho, chosen carefully because it was far from Caldwell Ventures and the prying eyes of paparazzi. Sitting at a corner table, Emma disclosed everything: her dissatisfaction, Gabriel's dismissive treatment, her fears for Sophie's upbringing. Maria hugged Emma. "You're not alone in this." Together, they planned Emma's new life. Meanwhile, Gabriel carried on, oblivious. He attended investor meetings with gusto, tossed out half-hearted invites to Emma for high society events, and flaunted the image of a perfect family man whenever cameras were near. The staff in the Caldwell penthouse noticed Emma's hushed tension, yet no one dared to pry except Richard Harrington, the butler. One evening he pulled Emma aside. "Mrs. Caldwell, I may be overstepping," he said quietly, "but if you ever need anything, advice or assistance, I'm here. I can tell something weighs heavily on you." Emma appreciated the concern but couldn't risk involving Richard. The fewer people who knew, the better. She thanked him politely and insisted she was fine. Late one night, Emma took a silent walk through the penthouse, stepping through the grand foyer, the living room adorned with art worth millions, the polished oak library where Gabriel often pretended to read but mostly made business calls. She ended up in Sophie's bedroom, where a small nightlight cast gentle shadows on the walls. Sophie was fast asleep, clutching a stuffed rabbit named Bun Bun. Emma's gaze lingered on Sophie's innocent face. She realized that for her daughter's sake, so Sophie could grow up believing in her own agency, she had to leave. In that instant, her resolve solidified. She kissed Sophie's forehead, tears brimming. Emma recognized she might lose everything, but she couldn't sacrifice her dignity or Sophie's well-being any longer. 2 nights later, with Gabriel away on a business trip to Singapore, Emma seized the opportunity. She'd arranged for Maria to park a borrowed car discreetly on a quiet side street near the penthouse. Emma slipped out of bed at 4 in the morning and gently woke Sophie. "Sweetheart, we're going on a trip," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "We need to be very quiet and leave right now." Sophie stirred, confused but trusting her mother. Together, they tiptoed through the hushed corridors. Emma carried a small suitcase filled with Sophie's essentials: clothes, favorite books, Bun. Her own belongings fit into a single duffel bag. She took one last look at the penthouse, remembering the myriad times she'd hoped this place would become a real home. They made their escape down the service elevator to avoid the doorman's scrutiny. Outside, a cold wind whipped through the empty streets. Emma spotted Maria, waiting anxiously in the driver's seat. With Sophie in her arms, Emma scurried to the car, her heart pounding like a war drum. As the car pulled away, Emma exhaled in a mix of relief and terror. She was leaving behind a life of luxury that most could only dream of. But she was also stepping toward a future where she could breathe freely, where she and Sophie could forge a life unbound by Gabriel's controlling shadow. The car ride to Maria's small Brooklyn apartment felt surreal. Emma pressed Sophie close to her side, the child half asleep and confused, but comforted by her mother's warmth. The city lights flickered by, and Emma swallowed a lump in her throat, grappling with a cascade of emotions: fear, relief, sorrow, and a fragile sense of hope. Once they reached Maria's building, Sophie fully woke, peering at the unfamiliar setting. "Mommy, where are we?" she asked, clutching Bun Bun. Emma forced a reassuring smile. "We're staying with Aunt Maria for a while, sweetheart. It's an adventure, okay?" Sophie nodded, though her lower lip quivered with uncertainty. Maria helped carry the bags upstairs to her modest one-bedroom unit. She'd prepared the living room couch, layering it with blankets and pillows, turning it into a makeshift bed. Emma laid Sophie down gently, whispered a lullaby, and watched as her daughter drifted back to sleep. Only then did Emma finally exhale. Maria guided Emma to the cramped kitchen, where she brewed fresh coffee. The rich aroma cut through the pre-dawn gloom. They sat together at a tiny table, hardly enough room for 2 chairs. For a moment, neither spoke. Words seemed inadequate. "How are you feeling?" Maria ventured softly. Emma sipped her coffee, ignoring how her hands trembled. "Terrified," she admitted, "but also free. I know it won't be easy." Maria nodded, sliding a phone across the table. "I got you this prepaid cell. Gabriel might track your usual phone or freeze credit cards. Use this for any calls." Emma's chest tightened. This was more than a temporary spat. She was effectively going off-grid to some extent. She thought about her meager bank account, which might not last beyond a few months of living expenses. "I'll look for a job," she resolved. "Something to support Sophie and me. I won't rely on him again." Maria squeezed her hand in solidarity. "I'll help however I can. Just promise me you won't go hungry or let Sophie go without. We'll figure it out together." Emma nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. "Thank you. I'll find a way forward." When dawn broke, Emma's first day as a single mother, albeit in secret, officially began. She left Maria's apartment briefly to buy groceries and a few basic items for Sophie. The modest street bustled with people heading to work, school children waiting for buses. No paparazzi lurked, no black SUVs with tinted windows. It was an ordinary scene she found oddly comforting. Back in the penthouse, however, chaos reigned. Gabriel had returned from his Singapore trip earlier than planned. When he discovered Emma and Sophie gone, he initially assumed they were out shopping or visiting a spa. But hours passed with no word. He tried Emma's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. He questioned the staff. The nanny said Emma had cancelled her shift unexpectedly, and no one knew why. Richard Harrington mentioned seeing Emma leave briefly, but had no details. Concern morphed into anger when Gabriel realized Emma's closet was nearly empty, and Sophie's belongings were missing as well. "How dare she just walk out on me?" he muttered to himself, scanning the suite for any note or explanation. He found nothing. His frustration ballooned into fury at the notion that Emma would disrespect him, the patriarch of the Caldwell Empire. He phoned his lawyers, demanding they trace Emma's credit card usage. He called private investigators, instructing them to find her immediately. The seeds of panic took root in Gabriel's mind, panic that perhaps, for the first time, he had lost control. Meanwhile, Emma and Sophie settled into a routine of sorts. Emma used her prepaid phone to contact a small community center in Brooklyn, inquiring about potential job openings. She remembered her old dream of working with children and hoped that, even in a minor administrative capacity, she could start anew. The center's director, Anita Reynolds, recognized Emma's name from her volunteer days long ago. Emma had a decent track record and a genuine passion for helping kids. "Come in for an interview," Anita said. "We can't offer much pay, but we do need an administrative assistant who can also help with tutoring." Emma's heart lifted. It was a small, humble beginning, but it was hers. She hung up the phone and looked at Sophie, who was coloring a picture at Maria's coffee table. Emma kneeled beside her daughter, kissing her forehead. "We're gonna be okay, sweetheart," she whispered. "I promise." As Emma attempted to rebuild her life, Gabriel Caldwell launched a relentless campaign to locate her. Through his extensive network of connections, he scoured bank statements, credit card usage, and phone records. But Emma had been careful, withdrawing cash in small increments and using the prepaid phone for calls. Her official phone lay dormant in her handbag, switched off. With no fresh leads, Gabriel's frustration simmered. He resorted to hiring a private detective, Marco Finnegan, renowned for tracking down individuals who didn't want to be found. Over a late-night meal in Gabriel's penthouse office, the detective laid out his approach, visiting mutual acquaintances, tapping into city surveillance, and exploring potential safe houses. Gabriel tossed a briefcase full of cash onto his desk, stating, "Spare no expense. My wife and daughter must return." Even as he fumed, Gabriel refused to consider the possibility that Emma left of her own volition. To him, there had to be a misunderstanding or some external influence. The notion that Emma independently chose to flee his world, well, that simply defied his ego. In the weeks that followed, Marco questioned staff from the Caldwell mansion to the offices of Caldwell Ventures. He also chatted with neighbors and Emma's acquaintances. Richard Harrington, the butler, played it carefully. He truthfully didn't know Emma's whereabouts, but he suspected she was making a clean break. When Marco pressed him for any clue, Richard simply replied, "Mrs. Caldwell said nothing to me. She left at odd hours. That's all I know." The pressure from family and business circles weighed on Gabriel. He had always cultivated an image of impeccable control, but now rumors swirled that he couldn't manage his own household. The board of Caldwell Ventures eyed him warily, worried his personal troubles might distract him from negotiations and expansions. Meanwhile, Emma progressed with her new life in Brooklyn. She secured a part-time administrative job at the community center. Although the pay was modest, she discovered a refreshing sense of purpose. Daily, she juggled tasks like updating program schedules, ordering supplies for after-school tutoring sessions, and occasionally stepping in to teach art classes to energetic children. Sophie adapted more quickly than Emma expected. She missed her old bedroom, but was soothed by Emma's constant presence. They shared a small pull-out sofa in Maria's apartment, making it a nightly ritual to read a story by flashlight. Sophie's favorite was The Velveteen Rabbit, a tale about becoming real even when one feels out of place. Tucked away from prying eyes, Emma felt relief that no one recognized her as the Caldwell heiress. She dressed in simple clothing, avoided Manhattan hotspots, and used public transportation. Sometimes she caught glimpses of newspapers or magazines showcasing Gabriel at high-profile events, with headlines speculating about her disappearance. She quickly learned to avoid those triggers. Her focus was now on forging a new identity, one shaped by her own choices, not by a Caldwell marriage. But Emma's anonymity was fragile. One afternoon, at the community center's front desk, she overheard a conversation between the center's director, Anita, and a volunteer. "Did you hear? The Caldwell Foundation is looking to sponsor smaller youth organizations." Emma froze in her seat. She recalled Gabriel's philanthropic foundation, often used as a PR tool to polish his image. Anxiety gripped her. If the Caldwell Foundation reached out to the community center, her cover could be blown. Sure enough, within a week, a formal inquiry arrived. The Caldwell Foundation wanted to schedule a site visit. Anita, thrilled by the potential funding, bubbled with excitement. "This could do wonders for our budget," she told Emma. Though panic surged, Emma feigned composure. She volunteered to handle the meeting details, hoping to intercept any Caldwell representatives. However, she secretly dreaded the possibility that Gabriel himself might appear, or that he'd somehow discover her through the Foundation's involvement. In the coming days, Emma prepared for the site visit, ensuring the kids' art projects were displayed. The facility was tidy, and volunteer schedules were confirmed. Inside, her nerves sizzled, but she managed a facade of calm. Little did she know, Gabriel's detective, Marco Finnegan, was closing in from another angle. A neighbor of Maria Farnsworth had casually mentioned seeing a young woman and child entering the apartment building, matching Emma's description. The net was drawing tighter, and Emma's tenuous new world teetered on the brink of discovery. The day of the Caldwell Foundation site visit arrived. The community center buzzed with anticipation, staff and volunteers hurrying to tidy up every corner. Artwork pinned to the walls showcased colorful drawings from local children, rainbows, family portraits, cityscapes. Emma had spent the early morning ensuring all administrative files were in order. She wore a plain navy blue dress, hoping it wouldn't attract attention. Anita Reynolds, the director, greeted the Caldwell Foundation representatives at the door. They were mid-level associates. A woman named Caroline Best and her colleague, Michael Chen, tasked with evaluating community programs. Emma's heart pounded as she observed them from behind the reception desk. For a moment she braced herself for the possibility that they might recognize her. However, neither had direct personal ties to Gabriel. They addressed her politely, but with no hint of recognition. Emma led them on a brief tour, showing off the tutoring rooms, the small library, and the multi-purpose hall where children played basketball. Caroline and Michael asked standard questions about funding, the center's operating costs, and the number of kids served. The tension in Emma's chest eased slightly. Perhaps she would remain safely under the radar. That hope was short-lived. Halfway through the tour, Sophie emerged from a side room, carrying her drawing pad. She beamed at her mother. "Mommy, look what I made." Emma felt an invisible jolt of panic. She smiled at Sophie, trying to remain calm. "That's lovely, sweetheart. Why don't you go show Missy?" "Anita," she said, gently guiding her daughter away. Sophie blinked curiously at Caroline and Michael, but scurried off without fuss. Caroline's eyes narrowed. "Your daughter?" she inquired, a note of interest creeping into her tone. Emma nodded, keeping her reply short. "Yes, she comes here after school sometimes." Caroline shrugged, apparently unperturbed. They continued the tour, concluding in the staff lounge. Michael thanked Emma for her time, mentioning they'd compile a report to present to the Caldwell Foundation board. Emma's heart fluttered again at the mention of Gabriel's involvement. She forced a polite smile, praying she remained just another employee in their eyes. As Caroline and Michael departed, Emma exhaled a massive sigh of relief. She almost laughed at herself for being so tense, but she knew better than to let her guard down completely. Just as she was about to escort them out, she noticed a tall, stocky figure in the hallway, Marco Finnegan, the private detective. He locked eyes with her, his expression revealing recognition. Time seemed to freeze. Emma's stomach flipped as her mind raced. How did he get in here? Had he tracked me directly? She needed to think fast. The detective took a step forward, eyes cold and calculating. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said quietly, "we've been looking for you. Gabriel wants you to come home." Emma's throat constricted. She waved a hand at Caroline and Michael, forcing a bright tone. "Could you give us a moment?" Her visitors, oblivious to the drama, nodded and walked out of earshot. Quickly, Emma pulled Marco aside, out of the main hallway. "I'm not going back," she hissed, keeping her voice low so as not to attract attention from the center's staff or children. "Tell Gabriel I'm safe, and I don't want to be found." Marco raised an eyebrow. "I'm not paid to relay messages. I'm paid to bring you back." Emma's pulse thundered. "Listen carefully. If you cause a scene here, it'll only hurt the children this center serves. I'm sure that's not something you or Gabriel would want in the press. I left on my own. I am not kidnapped, not in danger. Let me be." The detective glanced around, apparently wary of public attention. He stepped back, lips pursed. "Gabriel isn't going to like this," he muttered. "If you won't come willingly, there will be legal ramifications, custody battles, court orders, you name it." Emma set her jaw. Then we'll settle it in court. I'm not returning to that life. Now get out." They locked eyes, tension coiling in the air like an electric wire about to snap. Finally, Marco grunted and turned away, stalking down the hall. Emma closed her eyes, adrenaline pumping. She realized the cat-and-mouse game had escalated. Gabriel now knew where she worked, and likely where she lived. The illusions of hiding were about to shatter. After her shift, Emma collected Sophie from an art class. She was trembling with fear and uncertainty. The child sensed something was off, but Emma masked it as best she could. She texted Maria, "Marco found me. We need a new plan." When Emma arrived at Maria's apartment, her friend was pacing nervously. "I got your text." "What now?" Emma sank onto the couch, pressing her palms against her temples. "He threatened me. Custody suits, legal battles. Gabriel might try to paint me as an unstable mother." Maria set a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder. "You need real legal help, Em. I have a friend, Rebecca Ogilvy, a family law attorney, who might take your case pro bono or for a reduced fee. We'll figure out a strategy." Emma swallowed hard, tears brimming. "I don't want to drag Sophie through a public mess, but I also refuse to let Gabriel control us anymore." Maria knelt beside her, voice gentle but firm. "He's used to getting his way. You're the first person to stand up to him. It's going to be rough, but you're not alone." Emma hugged Maria, sobbing softly. She thought back to the confrontation with Marco, replaying his veiled threats. The next chapter of this ordeal loomed large, a legal and emotional storm that threatened to upend everything. Yet beneath her terror, Emma felt a flicker of determination. She would fight for her freedom and for Sophie's right to grow up in a nurturing environment. Gabriel could wield his billions, his investigators, his attorneys, but he could no longer wield her soul. 2 days after the confrontation at the community center, Emma found herself sitting in a modest legal office in downtown Brooklyn. The walls were lined with outdated family law textbooks, and the reception area was furnished with mismatched chairs. It was far from the high-end environment she once frequented with Gabriel, but it felt a world more genuine. Rebecca Ogilvy, a sharp-eyed, middle-aged attorney with a warm smile, greeted Emma and Maria. "I'm glad to finally meet you, Ms. Caldwell," Rebecca said, gesturing for them to sit at her small conference table. "Maria has filled me in on the basics. Let's discuss your legal standing." Emma described her situation, how she left the penthouse with Sophie, her meager savings, and her intent to start anew. She expressed concern that Gabriel would paint her as an unfit mother, given his resources. Rebecca listened intently, scribbling notes on a yellow legal pad. "Legally, you're still married, and you have as much right to your daughter as he does. Unless he can prove neglect or harm, he won't get immediate full custody. However, he might try for an emergency hearing claiming you abducted Sophie. That's a scare tactic often used in high-profile divorces." Emma's stomach churned. "What can I do to protect Sophie and me?" Rebecca leaned back, folding her arms. "First, file for separation or divorce in a venue that's fair, likely a Brooklyn court. That way, the case is anchored here. We'll also establish your living situation as stable. Since you have a job and a reliable friend providing housing, that's a good start. We might request a protective order if Gabriel threatens or harasses you." Emma exhaled slowly, nodding. Filing for divorce felt monumental, like burning the last bridge to her old life. Yet she knew it was necessary. "Let's do it," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. That evening, Emma returned to Maria's apartment and broke the news to Sophie gently. "Honey," she said, sitting beside her daughter on the pull-out sofa, "we're going to see a lawyer about our family. It means Mommy and Daddy might need to talk with a judge." Sophie's eyes widened, clutching Bun tightly. "Are we in trouble?" Emma's heart ached. "No, not at all. We just want to make sure we can stay safe and happy. Daddy wants you to come home, but Mommy wants to make sure everything is fair and that you're okay." Sophie nodded, tears brimming. She was too young to understand the complexities of marriage and divorce, but she sensed the gravity. Emma pulled her close, whispering comforting words. Meanwhile, at Caldwell Ventures, Gabriel had the sense that things were spiraling out of control. His board members noticed his restlessness. The CFO reported that Gabriel snapped at staff for minor errors. Word reached him that Emma had met with a family lawyer, and it enraged him further. He summoned Marco Finnegan once again. "She's lawyering up," Gabriel said, pacing the expensively furnished office. "I want you to keep tabs on her. If she tries to run to another state or country, let me know immediately. And if she's going to file for divorce, I want my attorneys prepared to strike back." Marco shrugged. "I can only do so much without crossing legal lines. Your wife isn't a criminal." Gabriel stopped pacing, glaring. "Don't lecture me, just do your job." He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "Emma's going to learn a harsh lesson. She can't beat me in this game." That night, Gabriel returned to an empty penthouse, the silence almost mocking him. Memories of Emma's laughter echoed in his mind, fueling his anger. He convinced himself she was ungrateful, a traitor who'd spurned his generosity. Yet beneath that fury, a whisper of doubt lingered. What if she's really serious this time? What if I lose Sophie? He poured himself a whiskey and stared at a framed family photo taken at Sophie's third birthday party, Emma's arm around him, Sophie perched on his lap. They looked carefree, content. Gabriel slammed the frame face down on a table, swallowing hard. Emma's legal process began swiftly. With Rebecca Ogilvy's guidance, she filed a petition for legal separation, citing emotional neglect and irreconcilable differences. It was a bold move, forcing the matter into a court setting where an impartial judge would weigh the circumstances. The day after filing, a court date was set for an initial hearing regarding custody and visitation. News spread like wildfire among Manhattan's social elite. The tabloids caught wind of billionaire Caldwell's estranged wife seeking separation, fueling gossip that Emma had either lost her mind or discovered some hidden scandal. Those who had dismissed her as a mere accessory to Gabriel were now eager for any scandalous details. Maria's apartment offered Emma a modicum of safety, though reporters occasionally lurked in the neighborhood. Emma carefully shielded Sophie from the paparazzi's cameras, often taking her to the community center through back entrances or leaving early in the morning. She also requested flexible hours from Anita, who sympathized with her plight and rearranged the schedule so Emma could focus on legal preparations. Finally, the day of the court hearing arrived. The courthouse in downtown Brooklyn was a flurry of activity, from attorneys rushing through corridors to families waiting anxiously on wooden benches. Emma wore a simple grey dress and clutched a folder of documents, including proof of her new employment, statements of her finances, and an informal list of references from the community center. Rebecca met her outside the courtroom. "Stay calm," the lawyer advised. "Gabriel may posture, but the judge is primarily concerned about Sophie's well-being." Inside, they found Gabriel already seated at the petitioner's table with his high-powered legal team. He wore an impeccably tailored suit and a stony expression. Emma's heart pounded as she took her seat, acutely aware of the tension radiating from her soon-to-be ex-husband. After some procedural formalities, the judge, an older woman named Lydia Kendall, addressed the matter of temporary custody. Emma's lawyer presented evidence that Sophie had been living with Emma, attending the community center's after-school programs and receiving stable care. Gabriel's attorney countered that Emma had unilaterally removed Sophie from a luxurious, well-resourced environment. Judge Kendall peered over her reading glasses. "Ms. Caldwell, why did you leave the marital home with your daughter?" Emma inhaled, voice trembling slightly. "I felt unsafe emotionally. My husband dismissed my attempts to find personal fulfillment, belittled my sense of self. I couldn't raise Sophie in that environment." Gabriel's attorney scoffed. "That's hardly a justification for depriving Mr. Caldwell of his parental rights." Rebecca intervened. "Emma Caldwell did not prevent Mr. Caldwell from visiting Sophie. He made no attempt at a civil approach to see his daughter. Instead, he hired a private detective to track them. We believe a neutral arrangement is best until the court finalizes custody. The judge nodded thoughtfully. Very well. I'm inclined to grant Mrs. Caldwell temporary primary custody, with Mr. Caldwell entitled to supervised visitation. We'll schedule a follow-up hearing to review final arrangements. Gabriel's eyes blazed with disbelief. He rose to his feet. Your Honor, I'm Sophie's father. We have a stable home, resources beyond measure. Why should I be relegated to supervised visits? Judge Kendall's tone sharpened. Because, Mr. Caldwell, you used a private detective to locate your wife and child, which suggests potential intimidation. The court aims to protect the child's emotional welfare. Gabriel clenched his jaw, swallowing his protest. For the first time in his adult life, a scenario was unfolding where his money and influence weren't enough to guarantee victory. Emma, meanwhile, felt a surge of relief. She left the courtroom with trembling legs, but a lighter heart. She had secured the first legal acknowledgement that she could care for Sophie independently, at least for the time being. In the hallway, Gabriel intercepted Emma briefly. This isn't over, he said, voice low. I'll do whatever it takes to bring Sophie back home. Emma, standing taller than she ever had in his presence, met his glare. You're free to try, Gabriel, but I won't let you intimidate me anymore. Her words hung in the air as they parted ways. For Emma, the hearing's outcome marked a turning point. The law, at least for the moment, was on her side, affirming that she and Sophie had a right to define their own life. Yet she knew the battle was far from over. Gabriel wasn't a man who accepted defeat gracefully, and the storm that loomed could easily overshadow the small victory she'd just achieved. Back at Maria's apartment, Emma tried to maintain an aura of calm for Sophie's sake. She continued her part-time work at the community center, gleaning a sense of purpose that balanced out the stress of the legal proceedings. Yet a gnawing fear lingered, fueled by Gabriel's parting words at the courthouse. True to form, Gabriel ramped up his efforts. He made media appearances, painting Emma as an unstable mother undergoing an emotional crisis. He donated massive sums to children's hospitals and educational programs in a campaign to bolster his public image. Magazine covers displayed Gabriel Caldwell wearing a solemn expression with headlines like, "A Father's Plea, Bring My Daughter Home." Emma avoided reading or watching these stories, but snippets trickled in through social media or well-meaning acquaintances. She felt torn between anger and heartbreak. The man she once loved had metamorphosed into a shrewd strategist, determined to spin their marital conflict into a public sympathy ploy. One night, while Sophie slept in the bedroom, Emma found herself sitting on the couch, tears slipping down her cheeks. Maria emerged from her room, noticing Emma's distress. Talk to me," Maria urged gently. Emma rubbed her eyes. "I see him on every channel, every headline. It's like he's rewriting our marriage as if I'm some reckless woman. What if the court starts believing him? He has so much influence." Maria sighed, wrapping an arm around Emma's shoulder. "His money can't change the truth. You have your job, a stable environment, and no evidence suggests you're unfit. Let him run his PR campaign. It doesn't guarantee a win in court." Emma nodded, sniffling. "I guess. It's just exhausting. I'm not used to fighting like this." "It's a new day, Em," Maria said, smiling softly. "Every day you prove you can stand on your own feet." Still, the nights remained sleepless. Emma tossed and turned, haunted by memories of good times with Gabriel, his spontaneous jokes, the way he used to look at her with genuine admiration before wealth hardened him. She wondered if Sophie would hate her one day for keeping her from a luxurious lifestyle. But each time she considered it, she reminded herself that emotional neglect couldn't be offset by mere luxury. At Caldwell Ventures, Gabriel snapped at employees and fired a junior analyst for a trivial error. The board grew concerned about his temperament. "Perhaps you should take a leave of absence. Focus on your family issues," one member suggested. Gabriel refused. He saw the business as an extension of himself. Stepping aside would be akin to admitting personal weakness. Gabriel sat alone, whiskey in hand. He had everything, yet he had lost her. Occasionally, he recalled Emma's timid pleas for more involvement in philanthropic work, her longing for something beyond dinner parties. But Gabriel pushed those recollections aside. Admitting guilt was not his style. He believed the upcoming final custody hearing would be his chance to rectify matters. He'd instruct his lawyers to unveil every tool at their disposal, even if it meant targeting Emma's mental and emotional stability. As the date of the final hearing approached, both Emma and Gabriel felt the weight of impending judgment. For Emma, it was a struggle to preserve her newfound autonomy and protect Sophie's future. For Gabriel, it was a battle to reclaim what he considered rightfully his, a wife and daughter who, in his eyes, should never have attempted to leave in the first place. As the custody battle loomed, Gabriel's carefully constructed life began to feel empty. The luxury, the power, it all meant nothing without his family. Stunned by the financial blow, Gabriel found himself alone in his penthouse late one night. His tie loosened and an untouched meal sat on the dining table. For a moment, he looked out at the cityscape that had always symbolized his triumph. Now it felt like a cold labyrinth where he might just lose everything. He sank onto a sofa, eyes wandering across the family photographs Emma hadn't managed to take when she left. One picture showed a beaming Emma cradling a toddler Sophie at a beach resort in Maui. They were all smiles, unburdened by the demands of success. A pang of regret welled up in Gabriel's chest. He wondered when he'd last truly laughed with his wife. When had his heart last been open to empathy rather than dominance? The next day, spurred by this inner turmoil, Gabriel reached out to Richard Harrington, the butler who had all but stepped away since Emma's departure. They met for tea in the penthouse's smaller, cozier sitting room. "I heard about the collapsed merger, sir. My condolences," Richard said with genuine warmth. Gabriel stared at the older man, remembering the countless times Richard had gently guided him during childhood. "Richard, I think I've made a mess of things," he confessed, surprising even himself with the admission. "I always assumed Emma needed me, that she was content. Now, everything's spiraling, and she's found a way to live without me." Richard nodded. "She's a strong woman, sir. That's been evident for a long time. Sometimes in your world, you forget that real love can't be bought or forced." A long pause settled. Gabriel fiddled with a teacup, uncharacteristically uncertain. "Do you think it's too late for me to make amends?" "That depends on your sincerity," Richard said softly. "You'd have to show genuine respect for her autonomy, not just words, but actions. Emma won't come back to a life of subjugation, no matter how lavish." That conversation planted a seed in Gabriel's mind. Over the next few days, he toned down the PR campaign portraying Emma as unstable. He cancelled the onslaught of negative press that his publicist had lined up. Instead, he directed his lawyers to reassess their strategy, focusing less on attacking Emma's character and more on proposing a co-parenting approach. Emma's attorney, Rebecca, informed her that Gabriel's legal team had suddenly become more conciliatory. Emma raised an eyebrow. "What's he up to?" Rebecca shrugged. "Hard to say. Maybe he realized the court would see through any slander, or maybe he's come to his senses." Emma felt a cautious relief. Gabriel's shift might mean fewer smears in court. Still, she didn't trust it fully. She prepared diligently for the final hearing, collecting statements from community center staff and neighbors attesting to her stable environment. She also asked Maria to testify about the emotional strain she'd witnessed in Emma's marriage. Meanwhile, Sophie's innocent questions continued. "Daddy used to read me stories," she said one morning while coloring. "Will he ever do that again?" Emma swallowed back tears. "Maybe one day," she replied softly. On the eve of the final hearing, Emma found a bouquet of lilies at the community center's reception desk, addressed simply to Miss Emma Caldwell. The note read, "I'm sorry for everything. I hope we can find common ground for Sophie's sake. Gabriel." Emma stared at the note for a long time. She couldn't deny feeling a flicker of hope that perhaps Gabriel was truly re-evaluating his behavior. Yet she also recalled the long nights of feeling neglected, his dismissive words, his assumption that she was merely an accessory to his empire. People can change, she thought, but only if they truly want to. The final hearing would determine whether Gabriel's shift in attitude was genuine or just another play for control. The day of the final custody hearing dawned cloudy and cool, as if the weather itself were uncertain about the outcome. Emma, dressed in a simple navy skirt and blouse, determined to present herself as the competent mother she knew she was. Sophie stayed with Maria, unaware of the tense legal proceedings that would shape their family's future. The courtroom was larger this time, reflecting the gravity of the case. Reporters milled about outside, but cameras were barred from the proceedings. Emma's heart pounded as she took her seat beside Rebecca. Across the aisle, Gabriel and his new, more subdued legal team conferred in hushed tones. Judge Kendall began by outlining the case details: Emma's request for primary custody, Gabriel's counter-request, and the evaluations made since the initial hearing. Then each side presented arguments. Rebecca highlighted Emma's consistent job at the community center, her stable living situation with supportive references, and Sophie's well-being under Emma's care. She also cited Gabriel's prior attempts at intimidation, though acknowledging his more recent cooperative stance. When it was Gabriel's turn, his lead attorney spoke calmly. "Mr. Caldwell would like to address the court directly." Emma's chest tightened as Gabriel rose. He cleared his throat and fixed his gaze on Judge Kendall rather than Emma. "Your Honor," he began, his voice carefully measured, "I've made mistakes. In my pursuit of success, I neglected Emma's needs and assumed she'd always be content in my shadow. I now realize that was wrong. Emma is an incredible mother, and Sophie deserves her presence. However, I also love my daughter deeply. I'm asking the court for joint custody to allow me to remain a significant part of Sophie's life." He paused, glancing at Emma for a fleeting moment. "I have no interest in tarnishing Emma's reputation. I admit to having used poor judgment in the early stages of this separation. But I've come to understand that coercion or force won't rebuild our family bonds. I simply wish to be part of Sophie's life in a manner that's fair and respectful." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. She was taken aback by his humility. Whether it was entirely genuine or a calculated move, she couldn't tell, but it was a far cry from the combative arrogance she'd grown used to. Judge Kendall observed both parties with a measured expression. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Mrs. Caldwell, any response?" Emma stood, smoothing her blouse. She inhaled, meeting the judge's gaze. "All I ever wanted was to be treated as an equal partner, not a commodity. I believe Sophie should have both parents in her life, provided it's a safe and nurturing environment. If Gabriel is sincere in his change of heart, I won't stand in the way of a fair custody arrangement." The judge nodded, her expression thoughtful. "This court is primarily concerned with Sophie Caldwell's best interests. Given the evidence and the apparent willingness of both parents to collaborate, I'm inclined to grant joint legal custody, with Emma retaining primary physical custody. Mr. Caldwell will receive scheduled visitations with an option to expand as time goes on, contingent on continued cooperation." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Gabriel looked relieved, though there was a trace of sadness in his eyes. Emma released a trembling breath, uncertain whether this was a victory or simply a new chapter of challenges. The gavel banged, and the hearing concluded. Outside the courtroom, reporters converged, but security ushered them away. Emma tried to slip out quietly, but Gabriel caught up with her. For a moment they stood face to face in the hallway. Lawyers and onlookers drifted by, but the two of them might as well have been alone. "I'm serious about changing," Gabriel said softly. "I know it won't be easy for you to trust me again, but for Sophie's sake, and maybe for ours, I want to try. Emma searched his eyes, still wary. Don't make promises you can't keep. I fought too hard for my independence. He nodded. I understand. Let's start with co-parenting, see where it leads. They exchanged a polite nod, a tentative truce in place. Though the tension lingered, Emma felt a glimmer of cautious optimism. She had no illusions that the road ahead would be simple, but at least, for once, they were on equal footing, guided by what was best for Sophie rather than just one man's ego. The weeks following the final hearing marked a new phase in Emma's life. The court's joint custody arrangement meant Sophie spent weekends at Gabriel's penthouse and weekdays with Emma. The schedule felt strange at first. Sophie's confused questions tugged at Emma's heart, but over time the routine settled into familiarity. Every Sunday evening, Gabriel would drive Sophie back to Maria's apartment. Each drop-off was a delicate dance, as he navigated a place that was worlds apart from his luxurious lifestyle. Initially, he'd walk Sophie to the door, give her a hug, then depart. Over time, however, Emma extended small courtesies, a brief invitation to sit in the living room, a cup of coffee. Their conversations were civil, occasionally even warm. One day, Sophie excitedly showed Emma a clay sculpture she'd made with Gabriel. "Daddy's helping me make a whole set," she beamed. Emma felt a pang of mixed emotions, gratitude that Sophie was bonding with her father, and a faint ache recalling that she once yearned for such nurturing from Gabriel herself. Meanwhile, Emma's life at the community centre blossomed. Her role expanded from administrative tasks to coordinating a mentorship program for teens. Anita praised her work ethic and dedication, eventually offering her a full-time position. Emma felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The paycheck was modest compared to Caldwell wealth, but it was her paycheck, earned through her passion, not inherited from marriage. Gabriel, for his part, found himself re-evaluating more than just fatherhood. He scaled back some aggressive business expansions, focusing instead on stabilizing Caldwell Ventures. He also donated discreetly to the community center, careful not to overshadow Emma's role there. Though Emma was initially skeptical, she acknowledged the gesture as a step toward better behavior. Their interactions remained cautious. Polite texts about Sophie's schedule, occasional phone calls about upcoming school events. Emma set boundaries, insisting that Gabriel not barge into her personal time or overshadow her decisions. Surprisingly, he respected that. The controlling tone that once defined him had mellowed, replaced by a subdued humility. Gabriel nodded. "I want to do better for Sophie." Emma hesitated, one step at a time. "Gabriel, I'm not sure if we can ever be what we were before, but I appreciate your efforts. Sophie needs her father." His voice softened. "I know I've lost your trust in many ways. Maybe we can start anew, co-parents and maybe even friends one day?" Emma exhaled slowly, a small smile tugging at her lips. "One step at a time. Friendship might be possible if it's built on respect." They stood there for a moment, the hum of the city blending with the hope of a gentler future. Emma realized that, though she'd walked away from a life of luxury, she'd found something more valuable. A sense of self, a voice that refused to be silenced. And Gabriel, once so certain of his dominance, had finally recognized that love couldn't be possessed. It had to be earned. As Emma headed home, daisies in hand, she felt a sense of closure. She and Sophie had carved out a new life, humble, yes, but genuinely fulfilling. Whatever happened next, it would be on terms that honored her integrity and Sophie's well-being. And maybe, just maybe, Gabriel was learning that a true family isn't forged by wealth or power, but by understanding, compromise, and a willingness to grow together. In the end, Emma discovered that the greatest wealth she could ever hold was her own self-worth, and that her daughter Sophie thrived not on lavish extravagance, but on love, security, and honest connection. Gabriel, once blinded by his own arrogance, came to see that real relationships cannot be bought or demanded. They must be nurtured through respect and genuine care. While their journey remains a work in progress, Emma and Gabriel have learned to collaborate for Sophie's sake, forging a new, healthier dynamic built on empathy instead of control. Their tale stands as a testament that life's toughest trials can lead to unexpected transformations if we are brave enough to step away from what no longer serves us and move toward a path of authenticity. If Emma's courage and determination moved you, please like this video, share it with others who appreciate heartfelt stories, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring real-life drama stories.